and Gilman miraculously survived, and then he gets captured by a whole different set of scientists.
You think he would have learned.
They take him to an oceanarium in Florida.
Oh, so they capture him and take him away.
Bring him to the States, baby. And weirdly...
Gilman goes to Florida.
Weirdly, the movie ends because he gets to Florida and then disappears into a crowd and no one can tell the difference.
You pop that collar high enough on a trench coat, you can blend into the Florida crowd.
Welcome.
Oh, here we go.
Welcome to the Low Grade Research Podcast.
Teeth in the lips. Lips on the face. Burba, burba.
Good.
Good.
We're just doing some of our warm-up exercises.
Well, it sounds like I was doing some of mine. I don't know that you did any.
Yeah, I do mine in private.
Yikes. Perfect. Perfect preparation for a podcast. Perfect preparation for a podcast. Perfect preparation for a podcast. Okay, I'm warmed up.
Let's run it. Are we live?
We're live.
Dude, what's good?
Well, we got somebody shooting fireworks in my neighborhood, so I'm hoping that doesn't pull through on the recording. I just edited one a couple of days ago, and I could hear the train that's like 4 blocks away from my house.
I actually noticed that. You shared some files with me from a previous episode or something that we'd been working on, and I thought I heard a train in it.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's just the train outside. Because for a good chunk of my life, I've lived in houses near train tracks.
Right. Sometimes even under them.
Sometimes, for a good chunk of
On top
time,
of
I
them.
lived under a train track.
In train cars.
And in a train. But, so for a second, I was like, oh, it's just the train outside. And then I realized I don't live anywhere near the tracks right now. So I did catch that. These mics are good enough to pick up trains a mile
I don't know
away.
what it is either, but the dudes that are running these trains right here, that we get, I think, 2 every night. There's one usually around 4 a.m., and then there's one around like 10 o'clock at night or something.
Sure.
And they just blast the horns clear. I think they see residential homes, and then they're like, oh, that's what I went to train school for, baby. And then blast it.
My favorite part of my job.
Yeah, but it's just like constant. The whole way through.
I thought someone told me once, because in the neighborhood we used to live in, there was tracks by it.
Right.
And I thought someone told us once that they have to do it if they're traveling over a certain speed. But if they were to just go a certain rate, like constantly,
Like slow down?
They wouldn't have to do it. Yeah. And not just for the crossing, but like for a substantial distance.
Sure.
And average speed or something like that, then they wouldn't have to do it. But because they travel at higher speeds on average, then whenever they go to a crossing, they have to pull the horn. Which I don't know if there's truth to that.
So it's maybe like
I
one of
don't
those,
mind it as much as others, but
like a school bus has to stop and put their flashers on every time they, just to regulate. I guess another way for me to have said that was just a rule they have to follow. I don't know why I had to compare with a school bus,
we
but
all have rules.
well, got them. Well,
So yeah, I don't know all the rules behind trains. I feel like there's less rules than other jobs.
You know who would be a really good resource to learn more about the rules about trains?
Tell us.
The Low Grade Research Podcast.
If you haven't heard, they release episodes about things you want to know about.
And sometimes things you don't want to know about. And we don't care.
Drop my pen.
Add trains to future list. That's going to be a fun note for me to come back to later. I wonder what the heck that means.
What are we talking about today? Trains.
What are we talking about today?
That is a great question. What are we talking about? Well, folks, we are starting our next series tonight.
You've already heard obsolete jobs, which undoubtedly we smashed out of the park, because how could we have not?
The reviews are crazy.
We covered every single obsolete job in the 8 episodes that season was.
There's only, since in the past 300 years, there's only 8 jobs you don't need anymore.
Yeah, so count yourself lucky. All you dog whippers out there, out of a job. Plenty of other work to get done.
You'll have to look elsewhere. So we're starting our next series. We're going over the Universal monsters. And by universal, I don't mean the monsters found within all cultures, but Universal Studios monsters.
Wow, that would be a great episode, too.
That would actually be... make a note of that.
Monsters in all cultures.
I call it chupacabra.
Oh, well, then I'm not doing it. That's right. We're talking about the Universal so like Universal classic monsters. So we got like Invisible Man.
We got Dracula.
Frankenstein.
The Wolfman.
The Mummy.
Aquaman.
Oh, wait. Bride of Frankenstein.
Creature of the Black Lagoon.
Creature of the Aquaman. So yeah.
Aquaman's bride.
We'll be releasing 6 episodes in October with a special extra episode on Halloween, and they're all going to be related to Universal monsters.
Yeah, we're excited about that one. There's a lot of history in those.
Yeah, and actually, today we're going to talk about the creature from the Black Lagoon, which was my pick for today.
Oh, yes.
But as with so many of these episodes we do, I feel like I start out with, maybe they just write the articles this way, but either I start out with an opinion of what it's going to be that is totally drastically changed by the time I'm done, or they just start the articles out maybe a little humdrum, and then you're thinking, how interesting could this be? And
sure, I get that.
By the end, you're like, oh man, there's underwater people that are dragging Amazonians off into the water to marry them.
I've noticed too in some of these, because I've started doing some research for some of mine, and I've noticed too in the beginning.
Yeah, that's right, folks. Mitch hasn't done any research up to this point. He's just now starting to do it.
I've been winging it the past 8 weeks.
It's been a freaking nightmare.
So imagine how much better it's gonna get. But the first part of a lot of the articles just start out, because a lot of these monsters, we're talking about the monsters from the movies.
Yep.
A lot of them talk about the writers involved and the directors, and so it just lifts off a ton of names, and it's super monotonous. It's a little boring.
Not that those people don't deserve their credit, but
not that they didn't work hard on these projects.
Go get your credit on IMDb or watch the movie.
Exactly. So once you get through all that, and then you get into the meat and potatoes of the history of these monsters, it really starts to pick up and get interesting.
Yep. And especially, some of these are fabricated basically, or like the one we're talking about today is loosely based on myths and legends from South America, but like, obviously, something like Dracula has like a rich history that's apart from Universal Studios.
Correct. Right.
So there's going to be a lot more to talk about. Or maybe there won't.
Yeah, who knows?
I guess we'll see who has that episode. Maybe we'll just talk about the movie Dracula with Gary Oldman
and other things that suck.
Dracula and other things that suck. From the Low Grade Research Podcast. Brought to you by Springville Meats.
Which, by the way, if you haven't checked out Springville Meats, do so now. Put a quick pause and go check out their website.
If you live anywhere in the Utah County area, it's absolutely the best meat place to go. Because you know what they say, Springville Meats, where the meat meets you.
That's what they say.
I can't remember.
Go check them out online, springvillemeatco.com. They also have an Instagram page. You can see their beautiful products in action. I don't know how you see that in action, but they do it.
We want you to know that they are not a sponsor of the show. They're not paying us anything, but honestly, we do like them. But one of the main reasons we're doing this is so we can get paid by them. And that can be monetary or in the form of, a sausage link every now and again. We're not particular.
Yeah. I work for Carved Meats.
Mm-hmm. You're mostly made of carved meats.
That's true. So anyway, go check them out. Give them a follow. Give them a call. Try out their product.
Well, now that we started out with a season announcement and a fake sponsor, what do you say we get into it?
Let's dive in.
Okay.
I feel like I'm excited for this series because this is one that is just catered to you.
Oh yeah, this is like for sure right up my wheelhouse.
Right? You've been excited for this before we even announced we were even doing this series.
Yeah, honestly, I was angling that we would steer this podcast toward these kind of topics before we even knew what we were going to start talking about.
I was going to say, this is the whole reason we started a podcast.
And in fact, I'm such a horror buff and scary movie guy. We used to do we still kind of do, but I used to do 31 nights of horror, try to watch a horror film every single night of October.
We did pretty good for a couple years.
It's exhausting.
It really was.
And I really love scary movies, but it is like on day 18, you're like, the world sucks. Everyone's going to die.
You're working full time. You're going to school full time. And you're like, let's throw in a horror movie every night of the month.
Every doll I own is going to kill me.
Yeah, I'd come over and you're just asleep in your recliner on some of those.
Yep, that's true. I remember like going on family vacations and we are like in an Airbnb and I'm trying to find a quiet place to go watch it, like Chucky 3 or whatever, which are terrible,
Just
by the
the
way.
worst horror movie that there is.
That was the worst time we ever did that, was when we did franchises, because it's like, I think we did Friday the 13th, we did Nightmare on Elm Street and Chucky, and then, gosh, I feel like there's one more in there.
There is. What's the Freddy Krueger?
That's Nightmare on Elm Street.
What's
Jason is
Jason.
Friday the 13th. Dang, dude.
Chucky? There was another one
Chucky's
in there.
Chucky.
Chucky is Chucky.
Anyway, but they each of those franchises have like, some have like 10 movies.
So many.
And it's like, oh, Halloween, duh.
Halloween,
The best one of all of
and
them.
only
we
one
forgot.
of them has Kevin Bacon. So
I know.
after that,
Well, that's not even Halloween. That's Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th. That's what I'm saying. Out of all of those, there's only one
I
with
know.
Kevin Bacon in it.
I know, and we still watched all the rest of them. Unreal. Anyway, yeah, so that was probably the worst time we ever did that, because those, I mean, you already get the like soul-sucking, you got to space horror films out, because they're just soul-sucking and joy-sucking if
A
you watch
little
too
bit.
many of them.
A little bit.
But yeah, then you're doing that on top of like the 7th Chucky movie, and it's just the same plot with worse actors and worse graphics. It's just hard to get through.
So anyway, we don't do it that much anymore, or that intensely.
We don't. And the thing we do is this great podcast that is so far opposite of a D-roll 7th series movie of a horror franchise. And we're going to prove that today.
Okay, so which monster are we talking about first?
Well, let me take you on a little journey.
Yes.
You've been saving your money, saving your pennies with one goal in mind, right? You're working extra shifts. You're eating ramen. You're walking and taking the bus and riding your bike so you can save some cash with one goal in mind, which is to travel to the Amazon, get onto a safari expedition, get into a little river boat, and you're going to go and try and find like the biggest anaconda you can find, right?
Ooh.
So you get right up to it. You got your cash, you pay for the trip, you take the flight, you're out there, you're on the boat, and then the boat turns a corner on the river. You go down a place that the guide's never taken you before. All of a sudden you're in a lagoon. And you've got a sinking suspicion. There's something in the water watching you. I wanted to say so bad, where does the lotion go just now? Which is a
Different movie.
totally different movie. And surprisingly, the creature from the Black Lagoon never once, I believe, says where does the lotion go, even though
Well, he doesn't need it.
I realized partway through researching this one that I have never watched the movie, and I even made a plan today to watch the movie, and then it just didn't work out. But yeah, so we're going to have to fix that. And I think you've said that one of the ones you're reading now, you haven't watched the movie before either, right?
Yeah, I haven't. So
Movie night, double
movie
feature.
nights.
All right, well, let's break it down, right? So, Creature from the Black Lagoon, like we mentioned in the top of the episode, some of these have like a basis in history and like myth that's
Sure.
directly related to the thing.
They have a bit of folklore behind them.
Yeah, and the Creature from the Black Lagoon is kind of like fabricated, but
Yeah.
it's loosely based on like Amazonian cryptoids, I guess we could say.
It's loosely based on any time you go swim in a murky lake.
Yeah, anytime you go swimming at all, from the ages of, I don't know, 6 until, I mean, now. And I know that there's something in that pool. If you're alone in a pool, there's no scarier
You can't
place
see
to
the
be.
bottom. There's something in there.
Nah, not for me. Dude, I went snorkeling off the coast of Honduras once.
Oh, wow.
And it was beautiful. The beach was beautiful. Everything was wonderful. And like, I wanted to be a marine biologist when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know all about the sea creatures, and I know all, I could list off their stats and all these things. And then I get in the water, and I'm like a 25-year-old man, and I saw a barracuda.
Oh.
And immediately turned around and went to shore. And that was my first actual snorkeling experience.
I would be so in between being terrified
Yeah.
and also fascinated because those things are so cool.
They're so crazy, and it was
But
huge.
they're terrifying.
It was like 3.5 feet long or 4 feet
Oh
long
my
or something.
gosh, dude.
And under the water, it looks bigger, but like
For sure.
it was mind-boggling.
That was like a few years ago. We went to Costa Rica, and one of the days we did some spearfishing. We paid this guy with the ricketiest boat that he probably stole
There's one of those in this episode.
$20 or $30
Sure.
to take us out to this reef, and he's like, "Yeah, this looks good."
Yeah.
And we dove in and went spearfishing, and it was like the sun was starting to set a little bit, so it was getting a little dark in the water. And all I could think to myself was, if you don't think about it, then they're not here.
Oh, sure. Like
Right?
sharks?
Like sharks and stuff.
Or the dude in the boat?
Both.
Oh.
If you don't think about him, he's not gonna be there.
If I can't see him, he can't see me.
But yeah, as soon as I dove down, and it was dark under the water. I was like, "There's things here that are 40 feet that way that I can't see.
That are
and
also probably 40 feet long.
that could be here in a moment."
Yeah.
And so I just had to think to myself, think about the task at hand. Go spearfishing. We'll be just fine. And we were. And we had an amazing experience.
Well, that sounds lovely. We're going to have to try that sometime.
But right now we're talking about
What
is in the
what
water.
a transition we just had. Cool story, Mitch. And let's not talk about that anymore. All right, well, let's talk about it. So Creature from the Black Lagoon is, like I said, kind of fabricated. So it's when you think Creature from the Black Lagoon, it's primarily the movie, right?
Yeah.
And it's the creature from the movie, and that's kind of a distinct thing that has its own kind of folklore and mythology and biology related to it. And really, I mean, everybody knows about, well, maybe not Gen Z, but most people know about Creature from the Black Lagoon. And it's like,
You've at least heard of it.
yeah, if not seen the movie.
You don't know the story, you've heard the Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Right.
If
But
you've experienced Halloween,
yeah, that's true. Then you've heard about the Creature of the Black Lagoon. That being said, though, I've never viewed it as like a high-powered big bad universal monster. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like if you're putting Creature from the Black Lagoon up against Dracula, like, okay,
Well-
one is clearly more interesting, clearly more dangerous.
Well, to avoid it, you just have to
Clearly
stay out of the
more pale.
water.
Yeah, also true. Well, kind of not true, as we'll find out today.
Oh, no.
He walks, baby. But yeah, so I started this kind of like, all right, let's just get it done, you know. But oh boy, man, this took me on a wild ride. There's so many things in here that are so crazy, and it gets crazier and crazier the deeper we get, which is my favorite kind of episode. So let me get some stats about the movie out of the way. Creature from the Black Lagoon is a movie released in 1954. It was actually filmed specifically to be a 3D movie, which in the 1950s in the United States, there was a huge 3D movie craze that lasted like 4 years, and it ended in 1954. And it crashed and burned so hard, the fad for this, that they filmed Creature of the Black Lagoon in 3D, and then nobody wanted to see it in 3D at all, so they just all went and saw it in 2D instead.
Interesting. So like 3D with the glasses and all those effects. We'll have to talk about that later, but I'd be curious to know how they did that with the equipment they had in the 50s.
Well, they did talk about it. So like it's kind of made a resurgence now, except the technology's way better, but it's prism glasses. So like you have a prism in the lens on each lens, and that prism will only show you certain parts of the screen, right?
Oh, sure.
And it's imperceptible, so you don't really notice if you're looking through these glasses, because you have like the ones that are red and blue, right? And that's kind of forcing the eye to merge the colors. But the prism ones is like, it does the same thing without the color differences. And so we'll just have like two images kind of like separately overlaid on top of each other.
Okay,
and then because
cool.
you're looking through a different prism through each eye, then it will force those images together to make it 3D, right? So it was that technology back in the 50s, but it was just like, I mean, this is a little bit of conjecture because the article didn't say, and the article's the source of truth, absolute positive truth. But I would imagine that the technology in the 50s for 3D movies was not very good. So I'm not really surprised that the fad only lasted for 4 years. But here we are. So they did show it in 3D in a couple of bigger theaters. So in a big downtown theater is what the page says, but who knows what that means really. So it's a monster flick, obviously. A really quick synopsis. We're going to get into the plot in much more detail here in a minute because it gets crazier and crazier the deeper you go. But a one-liner is that it's a group of scientists who encounter a fish humanoid monster in the Amazon, and the monster is dubbed Gill Man.
Oh, so it's the Shape of Water.
Yeah, actually.
But with less nudity.
And you hit that nail on the head so hard, dude. We're going to talk about The Shape of Water later in this episode.
Oh, wow.
The Shape of Water was supposed to be a reboot of The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Really?
Yeah.
But, like, what would have happened if she took it home?
Well,
You will be my pet.
I don't think that they were planning on being pets. They were a little more romantically involved than that.
I'll let you get on with the information.
Yeah, you're not trying to have fish babies with a goldfish in your house, and that is definitely what they were trying to do. All right, this movie was directed by Jack Arnold. He's known for Creature of the Black Lagoon, Incredible Shrinking Man, and It Came from Outer Space, which are like all three of those are kind of big hitters of old school monster flicks, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Other notable things about the movie, it was filmed in Florida. I don't know why I wrote that down, honestly. The worldwide gross for this movie was, at the time, $1.3 million. So in today's money is $15.2 million.
That's not bad.
Which is like nothing to even, like, if you're looking at big box office numbers now, it's like really, like, kind of like meaningless, really.
It's like low end of the middle of the road.
Yeah, it would be like
it'd
be like an art house flick or like an independent movie or something like that now. Like Avatar, or not, well, Avatar, they all make huge amounts of money, but Avengers Infinity Game,
yeah,
that made like $2.5 billion or something. So piece of garbage movie is what we're talking about now. So when it was released, the critics were a little bit so-so on it. There's a pretty well-known critic named Leonard Maltin who is actually still alive today. He's teaching at a place that I read the word teaching and then I didn't bother to remember where. So my apologies if he ever listens to this. I doubt he will. He gave it 3 out of 5 stars. And he said that this type of film had been copied so much that the edge is gone, but it's still entertaining.
Interesting.
And I hate to break it to Leonard. I mean, he's still alive, so I'm sure that he's seen. But if he thought the edge was gone in 1954, there was a lot of bad movies on the way. It gets worse, and I'm not sure it's going to get better. Rotten Tomatoes, as of today, I checked, has an 80% certified fresh score.
That's pretty good
for critics, and a 74% audience score.
Interesting.
It's also rocking a 6.9 out of 10 on IMDb.
It's not often that your audience score is lower than your critic score for a lot of movies.
Well, I don't know. I think that happens a lot.
I just feel like that's a trend I've noticed.
I think it depends on the movie, right? We had a conversation once about like what's a critic movie and what's not a critic movie or whatever.
Oh, yeah. You'll have to check out our other podcast. We talk about that. We do with another friend. It's called The Third Row Critics.
Out every Thursday.
Quick plug for our other show. Go check it out.
Check it out. You want to talk about the plot?
Yeah. I've been waiting.
So this is a three-parter, basically. They made 3 movies, and we're going to talk about the plot of the other 2 movies in a much faster way than I'm about to talk about the first one. And I only included them in this because the plot gets so absolutely wacky. At one point, I'm writing this down, and I figured, like, there's no way they're not just putting a bunch of ideas in, like, a bingo roller and just pulling out random stuff, because it makes no sense. It doesn't connect at all. It's the most wacky stuff I've ever read. So, anyway, let's get into it. So essentially, we start out, geologists discover a skeletal hand. It's got web fingers, and I don't really know how a skeletal hand has web fingers anyway. My note here says, I'm not sure because webbing is made of skin. So if it's a skeleton, I don't know. We're already a little bit...
Well, you're sharper than scientists of the 50s.
I'm sharper than the person that wrote this because we're going to talk about the actual science behind The Creature from the Black Lagoon, and this dude is dead on arrival. The quote, I'll give you a little teaser. The quote that AI gave me after researching what this condition would be is, such a condition would require immediate medical attention and likely intensive care to manage symptoms and the underlying cause. And that's just the description of the biology of the creature from the Black Lagoon led me to that conclusion. So, not a very compelling monster.
No.
Anyway, so they find this thing. It's got webbed fingers. And in the movie, it's like, this proves the link between land animals and sea animals. Like, it's this humanoid, whatever.
Okay, it's the hybrid.
It's the hybrid. So I didn't bother to really learn most of the people's names in this, but Dr. David is like the lead scientist. And so he's out at this camp in the Amazon. They find this webbed hand, and then he's like, I need to go talk to my colleagues about this. And so immediately he leaves 2 interns in the Amazon and is like, see you later, and like heads back to Chicago or wherever to talk to his folks.
It's always great when the chaperone just takes off.
Yeah, and surprise, surprise, Gillman, or the creature from the Black Lagoon, just straight up wanders into this camp and kills these 2 interns. So Dr. David, he returns back to camp. He's got kind of a posse with him, so they rent this steamer boat called the Rita, captained by Krusty Lucas.
Krusty Lucas? Oh my
Sir.
gosh.
Yes, sir.
To be fair, I don't know if I would trust the captain of a boat that had a normal name.
Oh, yeah, like Greg Smith.
Yeah, I'm not getting on that boat. Like, you've never sailed, Greg.
No, dude, Greg's going to eat you before that boat makes land.
Yeah, I'm going to go get on Sherman Lancaster's boat.
But you might get a couple of cool scars with Krusty Lucas, but you're going to survive.
Krusty Lucas.
You're not going to eat healthy food or food that's even within date, but you're going to make it back.
You'll get a lot of secondhand smoke, but you'll come back alive.
Oh, no kidding. And probably a lot of slaps on the back. Okie dokie. So Dr. David returns with some other scientists and then the crew of the Rita, captained by Krusty Lucas. They find these 2 interns and they're like, whoops, and then they start trying to follow more fossils.
They don't even look into it? Like why they died?
Well, they probably do. I probably didn't write very good notes.
Gee.
And to be fair, and spoiler alert, I didn't watch the movie. I just read about the movie, so I've got to watch it after. And we're going to find out that I was completely wrong, probably. But they follow the fossils downriver to try and figure out, like, because they keep finding them, and then they want to figure out what this thing is. And they head down to this spot they dub the Black Lagoon. And old Krusty Lucas says that it's the Black Lagoon, and it's thus named because it's a paradise in there, but nobody's ever returned if they go in there, right?
Oh.
Little do they know, Gillman has been paying attention the entire time, watching them do all this stuff. So they follow the fossils downriver, they get into the Black Lagoon, and then because Gillman's watching, Dr. David brings his girlfriend, who's also a colleague. Her name is Kay. And Gillman starts crushing on Kay super hard. Because why not? So he follows the group into the Black Lagoon because he wants to get after Kay. Kay starts swimming, and then there's like this scene in the movie where the creature's under the water, kind of like stalking her underwater, and then he gets caught up in some rope and then like leaves a claw behind. And so
just a claw falls off.
Yeah, but then that's like how...
Wait, just like his whole hand, or like a fingernail?
No, he's got like humanoid fingers. Yeah, but then his claws
like
are
the claw off
replaced
the
by
end of a
fingernails.
finger falls
Yeah.
off. Okay.
And so because he leaves that behind, then they're all like, "Oh, there's one here with us. Like he's with us. It's been revealed." So we fast forward a whole bunch. Gillman kills a whole bunch of the crew.
Sure.
Tries to kidnap Kay, and then he gets trapped. They trap him in a cage on board the boat. He escapes, mortally wounds a whole bunch more people, and then bails, right? So at this point, after a whole bunch of people have been killed, Dr. David says, nah, not worth it. And then let's go back to the city, right? Little do they know, Gillman had blocked the lagoon with logs, so they can't get out. So while the crew's trying to move him, this other dude named Mark, and I literally wrote simultaneously Mark in parentheses, another dude, fights Gillman underwater, and in the words of the article, is mauled.
Oh, yeah, you're not going to win. You ever tried fighting in water?
You ever tried fighting a fish?
You ever tried fighting your brother?
Impossible.
It's difficult. Imagine fighting someone that lives there.
Mm-hmm. Imagine fighting your brother if he's slippery.
Yeah, he's got those web bone hands.
Yeah, needless to say, he gets mauled super hard. So Gilman kidnaps Kay.
This is all in the name of love, by the way.
Yeah, that's really the whole thing, which is why The Shape of Water exists, because of all in the name of love.
It's just a more primitive creature that doesn't have the social skills to politely win over a woman.
Yeah, think of the guy who's running your local smoke shop.
Yeah.
Same exact dude.
Yeah. Think of the kid that sat in the back of your class and grunted a lot.
Yeah, old Grunty.
Yeah.
Krusty Lucas. All right, so it ends because Gilman kidnaps Kay. He takes her to his cave. They follow him, and then they don't know why they didn't use guns beforehand, but they just pepper this dude with bullets, right?
Well, they're scientists. They use pencils.
Pencils first, guns second, I think is the scientific method. They pepper him with bullets. He sinks into the lagoon, and then that's that, right? The movie ends.
Sure.
They all make it away happy and safe. There's 2 more movies after this with
so
the
they
same
missed.
creature.
So they missed.
Who is killed and dies in every single movie.
Oh, he didn't die. They just missed. They're scientists. They're not known for being sharpshooters.
Well, no, that's probably true. So that is all from the page for the creature from the Black Lagoon. And then it's linked to a different page that's just called Gilman, which is... I honestly am not quite sure why there's 2 different pages, because there's a ton of overlap information.
Sure.
But we're going to get into like the biology of this thing.
Sure.
And
well, I want to return real quick to like the folklore, unless you've got more planned.
I do have more on the folklore, but go ahead. Yeah.
So I just kind of have some questions about like...
Hit me.
Did they talk about where this idea came from? Like when they started writing the movie, like what inspired it?
Yeah.
Is there like some legends of... Because I know we've all heard of mermaids, and there's a lot of folklore behind that. And this almost seems like, what if a mermaid wasn't this beautiful creature that we've created it to be? What if this is actually what happens? You know what I'm saying?
There is folklore. So the guy who produced Creature from the Black Lagoon was he had an acting part in Citizen Kane. So he was at like this dinner for Citizen Kane with other people that had worked on the show or been in the show or whatever.
That had worked on Citizen Kane.
Right. And so there's this cinematographer, Gabriel Figueroa. Shoot, I'm just butchered that bad. Gabriel is the cinematographer. And he's like, they're sharing stories and swapping whatever. And he tells him really casually about this, like, these myths in the Amazon of like half human, half fish creatures that Gabriel claims were responsible for the disappearance and death of a good friend of his who was filming a documentary about this legend in the Amazon. But this dude didn't return.
So this is personal.
Well, for Gabriel,
he
sure.
he has some not firsthand experience, but he's connected to the folklore a little bit.
Well, and the guy that I don't know if I mentioned his name, William Allen, is the producer who is also in Citizen Kane. He just hears about this from Gabriel, and best I can tell, he does not care at all that this dude disappeared, that Gabriel's friend disappeared. He's just like, wow, that'd make a great idea for a movie.
Oh yeah, sorry about your friend.
Yeah.
Oh, I really got to get the funds.
How can I make money out of this? I really want to. But the legend that he's told about is for the Yacuruna, right?
Oh.
So it's in the Amazonian basin, which is basically, I mean, it's a huge chunk of land. It's like most of Brazil and then surrounding countries. When I looked at a map, it was like essentially the northern half of South America.
Yeah.
Right?
The Amazon's huge. Even now that we've chopped down a bunch of it, it's still really big.
Okay, you know what's crazy about that? I was just watching, you know that Ewan McGregor does like motorcycle trips around the world or whatever? Have you heard of that?
I did not know that.
He has like a dual sport bike and a buddy that he's really like childhood friends with or something, and then they'll film documentaries of them going like,
oh, cool,
you know, the whole length of the Rocky Mountains or like through the Himalayas or whatever it may be. But they do one where they go from like Argentina clear up through into Alaska on the Rockies.
Whoa!
And part of it was that, man, I wish I could remember. We're gonna have to find. We got to bookmark this. I'm going to find out what the name of this pass is called, and then we're going to do a future episode on it. But when you get up into the Amazon, there's part of the mountain range there is impassable. So the road goes and then it stops and you have to like make your way around it somehow. And I don't know how. We'll have to talk about it in a future episode. But like the road just ends because the terrain is so treacherous you physically can't make it through. And like this whole area, if I remember right, like the locals will say like, don't go in there. Like you're never going to come out of there.
Yeah.
So yeah, when you talk about like how crazy the Amazon is, there's I'm sure that there's still stuff that, well, people discover like new species and all kinds of stuff there all the time.
All the time, yeah.
Yeah.
It's still for as explored as it is, there's still so much we haven't discovered at it.
Well, you get a guy like Krusty Lucas out in there, dude, and
He doesn't know what he's looking for.
no, but he's gonna find it. He's gonna find it all,
And he's going to kill it.
and he's gonna kill it and eat it, or feed it to you. So Amazonian basin. So the Yacuruna is what the creature from the Black Lagoon is based on loosely. So essentially, they're mythical water people in the Amazon, and they live in really beautiful underwater cities that are usually situated at the mouths of big rivers, right? So they're really funky looking, and I don't want to trash on somebody's cultural heritage, but it seems to me they're just excuses for a lot of mistakes. So they're really hairy. They've got a head that's facing backwards and feet that are really deformed and facing backwards, which begs the question, if your head's backwards and your feet are backwards, don't you just have a new forwards?
Oh.
Chew on that, you clown.
Or is that just so it can swim and breathe while it swims? You know what I mean?
No. There's we're going to talk about it. There's a reason why their bodies are deformed. You'll never guess it. Your eyes are glazing over.
Yeah, because I'm trying to like imagine this. Do you have a drawing?
Well, no, but let's think about someone we both know that's close.
Who's got real poor mobility in their arms.
Great Grandma Margaret.
So it looks. So it looks like they're reaching forward from their back.
Right. You nailed it. You don't need a diagram. You know exactly what this is.
Wow.
I should have looked up. Maybe we should do it right now. Yacuruna. Okay, I didn't bother to look up an image of this when I was researching it, but these things are not fun to look at.
So why are they hairy?
Well, why not?
Well, that doesn't make you a very good swimmer.
Many of the greatest things that we know in this life are hairy,
Sure,
aren't they?
but
Harry Potter,
not things that live in the water.
Harry Styles,
Harrison Ford.
Harrison Ford.
Right, but if it doesn't make you like a very proficient swimmer if you're hairy.
Look at this picture. We'll post this to our Instagram. Let's get a reaction out of that.
Gosh. That just looks like someone they kicked out of the village for being too weird.
Well, yeah, no kidding. Actually, that picture kind of looks like M. Night Shyamalan carved it from wood. Weirdly. Let's not read into that.
All right.
Anyway, so they sleep at night or sleep during the day in the bottom of rivers and lakes, right? They just like lay on the river bottom. And it was very specific to mention that they sleep with one eye open. Not sure why. I'm sure there's a reason.
Every creature that lives in water does.
I would think you should.
Or at least half your brain open.
They can talk to aquatic animals and they control them. And then...
Oh, so this is Aquaman.
Well, it gets weirder.
Or it's that one guy from the last Black Panther movie.
Probably, it's probably more closely aligned to Amber Heard than Aquaman. All right. Okie dokie.
Oh, we're going to get into it.
They ride black crocodiles as canoes.
That's cool.
I guess.
That's cool folklore.
I thought that was a really weird thing to say. I've never heard of anybody refer to being on a crocodile as riding it as a canoe.
Does he have to paddle it?
Well, no, they also can talk to aquatic animals and control them. So I'm sure that they just hop on like horseback and tell it where they want to go.
Well, is a crocodile an aquatic animal?
Don't you think it is?
Well, it's like it lives in the water, but it's not like it's a fish or...
Well, it's kind of amphibious.
It's
but
not bound to the water. You know what I mean?
I know,
but
they don't live... You don't find them in places that there's not water.
Right, but they don't like live necessarily in it.
All right, how about this? The email for the show is hello@otherbrothers.studios. Otherbrothers.studio. why don't you let us know what you think, because we're never going to come to the bottom of that here.
Are crocodiles aquatic animals, or are they not?
And if you get it right, we'll send you a free T-shirt. You'll never know if you're right. We don't have the money to do T-shirts.
But a black crocodile, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. They also shapeshift, so they can transform into Amazonian river dolphins. You ever seen a picture of those?
No, those are real?
Oh, yeah.
That's not part of the folklore?
No. And they're wild looking. They're pink.
Really?
We'll post a picture of this on the Instagram, too. They're pink, and they got like a really long, kind of wild nose. They're also on the endangered species list.
It just looks like a regular dolphin that got too fat.
Yeah. Or has a skin condition.
Well, with a skin condition.
Well, that picture, I guess, does look like a chubby dolphin.
He's got terrible psoriasis.
The rest of them look better. All right, so we got they can transform into river dolphins, but they also can transform into like a human, like a handsome humanoid figure, because this is what the article says. They're attracted to the blood of menstruating women.
Oh.
Then they'll transform to attract them and then take them down into their underwater kingdoms. Okay?
So the good doctor's girlfriend was going through her cycle when they were in the Amazon.
No, I don't think that folklore made it to the movie.
That's all checking out.
No, I don't think it is. I think we already read into a lot in this podcast. I think we need to probably hold ourselves back when we can.
I'm just connecting dots here.
Okay. Mitch's room lately, it looks like it's those crazy, like red yarn connecting pictures on the wall.
It's all connected.
Yep. Our very last episode, when we finish this podcast completely, we'll let you know how everything connected in the end. It'll blow your mind. Mitch will figure it out by then. Okay, so they live in underwater cities, and the cities mirror those on land. I'm probably talking way too much about these, so I'll go a little faster. But I wanted to read this direct quote out of the Wikipedia page because none of it made any sense to me at all. And I reread this like a few times and decided just to put it in and read it to you. So it's talking about their underwater cities. Quote, they live in palaces of crystal with multicolored walls of fish scales and pearl, reclining on hammocks of feathers under a mosquito net of butterfly wings. The hammocks are snakes with turtles for seats.
And this is all underwater.
I think it's describing the city.
Sure, but the city's underwater, right?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So you take that to mean whatever you want to mean. I would imagine you do a little bit of shrooms, and this is going to make quite a bit more sense.
Wildly creative.
Wildly creative. I'm sure that it's probably like mistranslated from like a bunch of different texts.
Sure. Well,
from the Amazon.
There's so many languages as well that are spoken down there.
Yeah. Okay, so just to let people know, I want to give a little closure for this myth, and then we'll take a quick break. But pretty much to sum it up, these Yacuruna are dangerous spirits that lure humans to the water. They shapeshift to try and lure them into the water, and the whole point is to turn them. If you get captured by one, you'll slowly turn into one, right? And when I told you it was an excuse for mistakes, the article mentions when people disappear, like fishermen, husbands, and young girls who are mysteriously pregnant, they blame it on the Yacuruna. So it sounds like a bunch of men leaving home and not coming back, and then teen pregnancies, and you can just find a convenient excuse.
Sometimes I still wish we had something to put the blame on in our culture today, you know?
I mean, I think there's plenty.
I
blame you for most of the stuff going wrong in my life.
Hopefully not for all those things. My dad's gone.
Yeah, my dad's gone, and it's Mitch's fault.
My dad left us.
All right, so I said I'll just wrap this up about the Yacuruna. So they slowly transform. It starts with their eyes, and then their head turns backwards, and the purpose is so they can't see the way home, and then their feet turn backwards, so they have to continue walking into their underwater cities. That's the whole reasoning for the transformation. The only way to come back was extraordinarily unclear in the article. I didn't bother to do any more research about it because the only source we need is Wikipedia. But
I thought you were going to leave us on a really great cliffhanger.
No, I'm going to tell you what I thought the article was saying, and the article was already unclear. So 100% what I'm about to say is inaccurate. So the only way to come back as a human is to have your head turned back around by a different Yacuruna who has been turned into a familiar by a shaman who uses it for healing purposes.
All right,
So
break
you
that
yourself got to be a Yacuruna. You go see a shaman. You want to be a human again. And it only works if that shaman has already made a different Yacuruna his familiar for healing purposes.
So he's made a friend.
Yep.
And he uses him for healing purposes?
Yep.
How so?
He uses their magic and their power and their knowledge for healing.
Okay, for healing
And
villagers and stuff.
I mean, a shaman kind of implies that they're sucking magical energy out of them.
Sure. Kind of implies they're running a scam for the rest of the village.
Well, I don't want to say that and offend anybody, but anyway, next topic. So
I've only met Crooked Shaman. Anyway.
That's the title of our next episode, Crooked Shaman. That'd be a decent band name.
Ooh, the Crooked Shaman.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit more about the Gill Man, right? So we talked about what he was inspired by. I want to talk more about what they turned him into and the biology about Gill Man right after this. All right, we're back.
Oh, that was a long break.
Super long break. So I promised we would talk more about Gill Man. So we kind of have we talked about the real world origins of Gill Man. I guess to kind of bridge the gap between the Yacuruna and then this guy, William Alland, and then the actual story of the creature from the Black Lagoon. Alland, after he hears the story about this dude who disappears and doesn't care that the guy disappeared, he writes a story. 10 years later, he writes a story called The Sea Monster, right?
And which guy was this? Remind us who this is.
He's the producer of The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Okay.
Who was also an actor in Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
Who heard about this from the cinematographer, whose name I butchered.
I'm up to speed. Keep going.
Is that clear yet? So, anyway, there's a lot to do. I wrote a lot about how they designed the costume, which I'm not really going to go over now because it's not nearly as interesting as I thought it was when I was writing it down.
Watch the movie. You'll figure it out.
I will say that the costume they created, they went through a few different iterations of it. And in 1954, it cost them $15,000 to make.
Oh, my gosh.
Which is $175,000 today.
That's insane.
For a costume.
Did it have hair on it?
No hair.
I still can't get over the hair thing. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, it's uncomfortable. And when I think hair on these Yacuruna, it's like real thick, stringy, nasty looking. It's not fluffy, husky
it's not
hair.
Fluffy.
You know what I mean?
It's real shaggy.
Yeah. It's gross.
It's like Chewbacca in the water.
Yeah, except greasier, I guess. Chewbacca in the water is probably pretty close. Okay, I want to talk about the biology of this thing. Because this is where things got really crazy. Because we're actually going to do a little bit of real science on the Low Grade Research Podcast.
I love mixing science and fiction.
Yeah, fact and fiction. Right together. So they kind of created their own lore and biology for the creature from the Black Lagoon. Because you would while you're creating the story. No,
for sure. Well, there's stuff you have to come up with to fit your movie.
Yeah.
Your own story, right?
Yeah. And as nonsensical as the other movies are, which we'll talk about in a second, there has to be some basis in I guess logic is maybe a strong word, but they have reasoning. So this thing's fully amphibious. It breathes air and, in the first movie, it breathes both air and water. It has a set of gills and lungs. In other movies, that's not the case. Large webbed hands, claws, tough skin. It's self-healing, so it can survive lethal human wounds, including immolation, which is death by being set on fire.
What?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it just jumps back in the water.
I guess it just survives it.
Were you saying its burns heal quickly?
Yeah. Yeah.
It'll heal from a sick burn.
Which it is lit on fire in the third movie. I don't know why.
Oh my gosh.
They talk about that in relation to the first movie, and I don't know why.
But they waited till the third movie to actually do it?
Yeah, you got to save your best tricks for last. How are you going to get people to come to 3 movies about the creature from the Black Lagoon unless you're setting one of them on fire?
You have to leave some of the secrets for the other movies.
Yeah. You get it.
Okay, cool. So it's got accelerated healing properties.
Yep. He's also superhuman in terms of strength, right?
They all are.
Very strong. But the downsides now, he's very photophobic, so he's afraid of the light.
He's not very good looking. I don't think he'd be inclined to have his picture taken.
Well, I don't think that he's afraid of the light because he's worried about people seeing him.
Photophobic, baby.
Oh, Lordy. Did you just become a dad in front of my very
Yes,
eyes?
I did.
Because that was a terrible joke.
Okay, so afraid of light.
Here's another weird detail. He's vulnerable to rotenone,
Okay.
which is like it's a pesticide derived from like poison in seeds that kills fish.
It's a very oddly specific thing to include.
It seemed like that, like in the 1950s, you know how like there was just weird cultural fixations with things?
Oh, for sure.
Like
Okay,
I think that was right in that wheelhouse.
This thing's got weaknesses. What else? Can heal from fire? Nah, what else? Pesticide. That's the one.
Rotenone. If we're lucky, we can get him to sponsor this movie.
Rotenone. He can't stand it.
Are you trying to keep the Gill man away from your house? Rotenone. For today only, you can buy a 55-gallon drum for the price of a small car.
Keep the rodents and the gill man away from your kids.
With Rotenone. So this is where it gets actually
not
crazy.
Sponsored by Rotenone.
And we are sponsored by Rotenone. We have to sell like 10 drums of it a month, or else we owe them money. This is where we're going to start doing real science, okay?
I'm ready.
So in the article, it says that 35% of Gillman's blood is white blood cells.
Okay. That's a lot.
And I think the reasoning behind it was that white blood cells are really heavily involved with immunity and immune responses. And I think that they were thinking that's what helps it to heal fast and be kind of impervious to some of these things, right?
Sure.
In reality...
Oh, yes.
35% of your blood being white blood cells has massive repercussions health-wise.
Uh-huh.
All right. Should we talk about them?
Yes, please.
Right out of the gate, you have almost a complete loss of immune function.
Really? So too much is not a good thing.
Yeah. So white blood cells fight infections. And, I should mention, it very specifically says that 35% of his blood is white blood cells without a nucleus in the cell.
Why would it not? Oh, that's just white blood cells.
No, white blood cells have a nucleus.
Okay,
All of the cells in your body have a nucleus. It's where the DNA is housed. That's where the instructions are housed for what the cell does. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know why it says that, but it says 35 of his blood is white blood cells with no nucleus.
That's oddly specific.
It's a very strange detail. But having 35% of your blood be white blood cells is hugely damaging in and of itself. But ones that don't have a nucleus is like this would not be a hard monster to kill because he's already dead. So you have like a loss of immune function. So white blood cells fight infection, so you would think that having more of them would be better. But without a nucleus, they don't have any instructions for how to operate.
Yeah, they're just there.
So they're just there. So white blood cells in mammal blood is usually about 1% of the blood.
Wow.
So, and I looked it up in fish, and it was hard to find in fish because it varies more wildly, but almost across the board, fish typically have less than 1% white blood cells.
I was gonna say 35% seemed high, but I'm not a biologist.
No, but when you compare that with 1%, which is normal, it seems real high.
You'd think it'd be super healthy.
So it starts
impervious to infection.
Mostly white blood cells. The real downside is that 35% white blood cells means that you have a massive decrease in red blood cells and platelets. Right?
Right.
So let's get into it.
So that would affect like transport of nutrient and stuff through the rest of your body.
For sure, with the red blood cells.
Yeah.
It would also, less platelets means that you're pretty much going to bleed all the time when you get cut with anything because your wound can't clot.
Good thing he's got tough skin.
Right.
They already thought about that. He's got tough skin. Next one.
Next. No, that's not going to affect him.
No, that one checks out.
Yeah,
Next.
we're good. Anemia is going to be a big problem. Fatigue, weakness, and shortness of breath. Like you said, you're getting a lot of those nutrients and stuff and oxygen through your red blood cells.
Yeah.
So even if he's breathing super heavy all the time, he literally doesn't have enough red blood cells to take the oxygen around his body. Yeah. So he can have gills and lungs, baby. It's not going to matter.
He doesn't get sick, but he can't take stairs.
Yeah, well, I know a lot of
or
guys
swim
like that.
fast.
Honestly, that's me most of the time. Actually,
I don't get sick often, but don't you dare put me in front of some stairs.
well, and I do get sick, and I can't take stairs, so I'm not even half good. Okay, you have cellular abnormalities, right? So the lack of a nucleus, according to the internet, is, quote, a profound cellular defect, right?
Sure.
Which would be indicative, medically speaking, of a severe bone disorder, most likely leukemia.
Oh my gosh.
But if you skate by not getting leukemia as the creature from the Black Lagoon, you're going to have some other massive bone infection or disorder. Because your white blood cells come from your bone marrow, and if they don't have a nucleus, then there's something seriously wrong going on with your bones.
Then they don't actually do anything.
Right. So he's got leukemia. He's tired and weak, and he's bleeding constantly.
So maybe he was just a regular dude, but he's
liked
so
to swim
sick.
and he had leukemia.
He's so sick. He's just malformed and just withering away.
Well, this sure takes the tone of the podcast down.
I think he just needs help.
I think he's just a guy. He lives in my building. So it gets a little worse.
How can it get worse for this poor man?
With no nucleus. So the nucleus in a cell houses the DNA, and the DNA are the instructions and the roadmap for how the cell operates in the body. That's for every cell that you have in your whole body. You have you have the same DNA, but the cell will interpret things differently depending on what their function is supposed to be, right? So if there's no DNA, then there's a whole bunch of functions that are going to be disrupted that a white blood cell is responsible for. Phagocytosis, I've heard it both ways, is the primary responsibility of a white blood cell. It's destroying, and they kind of eat pathogens and debris and stuff like that's in your blood or whatever. They kind of eat that up. So if you're thinking of bacteria or viruses or whatever it may be, that's the prime way you get feeling better, because you got white blood cells out there eating other nasty things.
Right.
But they can't do that if they don't have DNA to know how to do it.
Well, yeah, they're just sitting there like nothing.
Yeah. The next one is cytokine production, which is a signaling molecule, and it helps regulate immunity and kind of like immune responses, right? We get way more in depth, and that's about it. I read a lot about it to understand it, but for the sake of the podcast, I didn't want to just dive into really heavy biological science. But essentially, it also would inhibit immune responses, because there's a certain protein that has to be present for your immune system to kick on.
Right.
But that wouldn't exist without DNA. And then it also removes the main, for lack of a better term, chemical compound, which is used to kill pathogens, right? So movement to infection sites is not possible because there's no nucleus to take them there. And then cellular repair, if the white blood cell or any others, primarily white blood cell, if it gets damaged in some way, it just is damaged and it's toast. It can't repair itself at all.
Yeah.
In conclusion,
there's a GoFundMe for this man, and he needs our help for the medical bills.
Who we found out is just a regular dude who's just struggling. Gilman has got leukemia. If not some severe bone disorder, he's got leukemia. And if it can't get worse, he also is severely weak, very short of breath, super fatigued all the time. If he starts bleeding, he can't stop bleeding. He is incapable of starting his immune system, maintaining his immune system, or overcoming any infection at all, right? So I'll go back to my earlier quote. Such a condition would require immediate medical attention and intensive care to manage the symptoms and cause.
Oh, terrible. And on top of all that, he's struggling to find love.
Yeah, and he can't speak any language known to the above water people.
To the above water people, yeah, to people.
So he's just sick as a dog and lonely. A good recipe for murder.
In the arms of an angel.
Donate today, and for the price of a single cup of coffee, and you too can save a monster in need. This monster's name is Greg. Greg bleeds without knowing he's bleeding.
Oh, poor.
He has leukemia.
You're just living in water. You don't know if you're bleeding.
Yeah, it would just feel like you're bleeding all the time. Okay,
So he technically can't live. So what's next?
Well, I got kind of two things left, right? We've been going quite a ways. I mean, we're about at the hour mark now on the podcast. I shouldn't have said that because we're going to edit probably half this out, and people are going to be like, I've been listening for 20 minutes, and you said you're at the hour mark.
Mark it.
But we got kind of a couple of things left. I want to talk about what happens in the two subsequent films because they get crazier.
That's right.
And then I want to touch just briefly on The Shape of Water. So,
because to end the first film, they shoot him in the water. They think they've hit him, and they leave.
No, they don't think. In the words of the article, they riddle him with bullets, and he sinks into the water and dies.
Sure, he's got real tough skin.
I'm not sure he does. I'm thinking of Strong Breeze could end this whole movie without us starting.
We have no proof that any of those bullets penetrated the skin.
Any one of these people with a cough would totally destroy this monster, and then everybody would be fine. Yeah, and the first one. So that's how the first one goes. It all happens in the lagoon itself, and then they shoot it. They fill it with bullets, dies, and then they all go home. Everything's all good. In movie number 2. It comes back from the dead.
He comes back as a lead pencil.
Oh, I should say, I didn't mention this before, but like part of the lore, and there's a couple of novels that have been written and stuff like that, but like they all go, the lore of the creature from the Black Lagoon is that he's part of either an alien group or just part of the evolutionary chain, that his species was alive and kind of dominated during the Devonian age, which is 358 million years ago.
Oh, wow.
And he's just like the last one alive and has just persisted, I guess.
So he's been alive that long?
I don't know. It's really unclear, and honestly,
a weird reference to it.
I'm not sure it matters to the story.
Like, there's a lot of holes. They're not going to worry about it.
Yeah, there's just a couple of holes so far. All right, so the next movie is called Revenge of the Creature. That's part 2.
When was this released?
Oh, geesh. I don't know. I didn't look.
Like same decade, like same era? Because the first one was released mid-50s. Would you say 54, 53?
Yeah, 54 was the first one. I didn't look it up. I would imagine they were released probably around the same time. Okay. Because they have like a lot of the same actors and stuff.
Okay, sure.
Like the people, they had an actor for Gilman when he was on land, and then a separate actor for Gilman when he was swimming.
Because one could swim and one couldn't.
I would imagine so. Maybe one was more buoyant than the other one. But it's the same people acting as Gilman and the other two, so it's got to be like within a reasonable time frame.
Sure.
So in Revenge of the Creature, this takes place about a year after the events in the first film. And Gilman miraculously survived, and then he gets captured by a whole different set of scientists.
You think he would have learned.
They take him to an oceanarium in Florida.
Oh, so they capture him and take him away.
Bring him to the States, baby. And weirdly...
Gilman goes to Florida.
Weirdly, the movie ends because he gets to Florida and then disappears into a crowd and no one can tell the difference.
You pop that collar high enough on a trench coat, you can blend into the Florida crowd.
You seen DeSantis? That dude's a swim trunk away from turning into this monster.
Yeah, I think everyone's on board so far. Like, yeah, I've been to Florida.
Yeah, not a single person's disagreed with what I just said. That's the sad part.
Yeah, everyone's leathery. We get it.
Yeah, I read 3 news articles about that this week.
They think they spotted him.
They get him into Florida, and he gets this crush on an ichthyology student, which is the study of fish, right? He's got a thing for getting a crush in every movie.
He's got a thing for young co-eds.
It gets worse because he also has a thing for stalking and kidnapping, which he does in this movie as well.
Well, we talked a little bit earlier. He's lacking the social awareness.
Yeah, just language skills, basically.
Language skills, body language.
And you know what? Maybe it's an appropriate time to mention this, too. A lot of women are very nice.
Yes.
And if you're talking about an attraction from man to woman and woman to man, it's important to know if you're the man that just because a girl's nice to you doesn't mean anything more than she's just being nice to you. And it's your responsibility to just have social skills and understand when they're being nice, or maybe if they want to be asked out or something like that.
Absolutely.
Take an extra second, think about it. If it doesn't seem like the right thing to do, don't do it. If they say no, move on with your life.
And on the other end of that spectrum, girls, it's okay to be a little mean, to push something away that isn't going to benefit you.
Yeah, especially if they just keep coming back. I mean, you got to change your... you got to be mean at some point.
It's not okay to sacrifice your safety just to be nice.
And if we had taught these lessons, these fatherly, warm lessons to this creature, we wouldn't have 3 whole movies.
There's your PSA for this episode.
So he gets this crush on this ichthyology student, stalks her, kidnaps her when she's at a boat party, and then he's trying to get away. He gets found out. He's trying to get away. He gets shot by police, flees into the ocean, tries to swim away, but succumbs to his wounds and dies in the ocean.
Okay, so
Death by cop.
that check. Just another day in America.
I just took such a big drink. I almost spat over this microphone and my laptop. We just about watched the podcast end.
Yeah, was this movie made last year?
We're not making any money from this. We literally won't financially recover from that.
All right, what happens in the third one then?
All right, so the third one's the wackiest of all 3, okay? And bear with me here. I'm just going to rapid fire my notes on the third one.
Yeah.
And
Because none of you are going to see it.
Feel free to hold your questions to the end, please. Third one's called The Creature Walks Among Us. After living in a Florida river, Gilman is found and accidentally immolated, burned alive.
Accidentally?
I'm not sure how that happens. His severe injuries make it to where his gills and scales fall off. His captors perform emergency surgery on him to prevent suffocation. They do x-rays. They find out that he has a primitive set of lungs, which directly contradicts the lore from the first movie where he has lungs to breathe air. Because they see he has primitive lungs, they perform a tracheotomy. He now breathes air. He's nearly human. They put him in a nice suit and they take him to a California mansion.
What?
Literally. An estate, sorry. California estate. They imprison him there while they try and integrate him into society, but his captors frame him for a murder, and then Gilman escapes into the ocean.
Oh my gosh.
That's part 3.
Okay, now I do want to see that one.
Yeah, honestly, I think
it's the same guy. It's the same Gilman from the other 2 movies.
Yeah, I mean,
They're
he's the last of his
he's
kind.
alive.
Yeah, there's only
That's
one.
Fair.
So,
Wow.
yeah, it kind of seems like the
So
middle movie's maybe
many
not
questions.
worth watching, but I would totally watch the first and the last.
Yeah, I think we gave you a good... We told you... We just gave you everything that happened in the second.
Yeah.
Go to the third.
So it's had tons of remakes and reboot attempts and cancellations and all this stuff. I don't think it's not a terribly compelling story, I don't think. And if you're talking about all of on the grand scale of Universal monsters, I think there's way more compelling monsters to spend time and energy.
Sure. I could see you doing something different with the story and premise to make it a little more interesting, but it doesn't seem like it's got enough of a fan base to really spark something for it.
Which has been recently financially backed up, right? So you may remember the 1999 cinematic masterpiece, The Mummy, starring Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz.
Oh, beautiful film.
Ever seen it? If we actually did an episode about that in Third Row Critic, so feel free to check that episode out. It would have come out probably last month sometime. So they tried to do a reboot of The Mummy with Tom Cruise. Remember that?
That's right, yeah.
And there were some decent parts in that movie, but overall, it flopped super hard.
It wasn't amazing.
It was Universal's attempt to position themselves with the dark universe, and then they were going to reboot all of these monster movies and do a new version of all of them, right? So it started with The Mummy, and then if The Mummy went well, they were going to move on to, I think The Invisible Man was next, and then Creature from the Black Lagoon, and then they had, it would have been like Wolfman, Dracula, the whole 9 yards, right?
Right.
But because The Mummy flopped so hard, the entire Dark Universe flopped with it, and they just bagged the entire idea.
I think they kind of went wrong with that one with putting Tom Cruise in it.
How so?
I love Tom Cruise and I'm a fan, but I think he's known for so many other things. I think it just kind of like, I don't know, overshadowed it. You know what I mean? Like
kind of like putting a banana in a brownie, and then the only thing you can taste is banana.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was the movie about the mummy and a mummy, but you've got Tom Cruise, and now the movie's about Tom Cruise.
Like burying your neighbor in your backyard, and all of a sudden you've committed a crime.
Exactly.
Yeah, you get it.
Been there, done that. Anyway, that's a bummer.
Anyway.
About the Dark Universe.
Yeah, about the bananas. Okie dokie. So, I had mentioned earlier that it did inspire The Shape of Water, which was supposed to be, they had signed on Guillermo del Toro to do a reboot of The Creature from the Black Lagoon. But, I mean, this is kind of like a common theme in Guillermo del Toro's movies in general, that he makes a lot of scary movies, but focuses on the human aspect of that movie, and then the scariness is kind of like secondary. And you know, some people don't like that, and some people are okay with it or whatever.
Yeah.
When he proposed that his version of The Creature from the Black Lagoon would be focused on the monster's point of view, and that he was trying to find love and succeeds in finding love with the main female lead, the executive producers were like, nah, yeah, we're not going to do that. Yeah. No, we want a monster movie, bro.
No,
we don't
Guillermo,
want this freaking garbage you're trying to pitch.
We've told you 8 times.
Quit sending this across our desk.
For the last time.
So, if it seems like The Shape of Water has a surprising resemblance to The Creature from the Black Lagoon, it's because Guillermo del Toro just took his script, renamed it Shape of Water, and went ahead and made the movie anyway.
That was going to be my next question. He just kind of ran into his own thing.
Yeah, which worked out for him because in 2018 it won Best Picture at the Academy Awards.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. It is crazy, and I've got respect for Guillermo del Toro. I love some of the stuff he's done. Some of it I'm not a super fan of, and I really didn't care for that movie at all. So
it was weird, man.
Didn't we? We almost walked out of that when we were watching it, didn't we?
No, that was a different one.
I mean, we have walked out of a few.
Because I've only watched part of that movie, because I think it was on Netflix or something for a time, and I watched part of it, but I lost interest quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to position a creature feature to not really focus on the creature feature part of it.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're into bestiality with fish, then this might be the movie for you.
Cool. So there's something I got to mention in the episode notes. Thank you for making the editing part so much more difficult.
Oh, you're not going to include that?
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, am I going to include that? 100%. You said it.
I said you're not going to include that.
Oh no, I'm going to include it. It came out of your mouth, and you have to live with that shame. You're not getting out of it. I'll watch this podcast burn to the ground and your reputation with it. I don't care. We haven't made any money on this. We've got nothing to lose. Okay, so a couple more things, references, and then we'll wrap up, huh? So in literature, there's a 1977 novelization, and I mention these because it just speaks to such an incoherent strategy for the origins of this creature. So there's a 1977 book, Creature from the Black Lagoon, by Carl Dreadstone, and in it, he describes the creature as a giant 30-ton hermaphroditic giant. Wrap your head around that.
30-ton.
30-ton hermaphroditic giant. Okay.
And yet it escapes into a Florida crowd.
Well, no, I don't think he talks. Well, he probably actually, based on that description, he probably does talk about Florida quite a bit. But they call it AA for short, or Advanced Amphibian. So this expedition finds it. They're all killed by AA, and then finally they kill the monster with a U.S. Navy torpedo boat. That's the book.
Riveting.
Kind of seems like it's not really the same story at all. I don't know why they titled it the same thing.
No.
There was another book.
Like, there's no creature that exists that's 30. How big is a blue whale? 30 tons?
Oh, blue whale's
so huge.
Blue whale's way bigger than that.
Yeah, but that's so huge. I mean, maybe whale's probably bigger, but like 30-ton creature?
Okay. No, it's about to blow your mind how much a blue whale weighs. Oh shoot, I gotta convert it from.
Well, then find us a sea creature
is
that's
2,000
comparable.
pounds to a ton, yeah?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Why don't you tell the folks a nice story while I do some quick math?
Yeah, because there's no way we can edit this out.
Now, why would we? So a blue whale at the heaviest, according to Google, is 330,000 pounds, which is
big whale.
165 tons.
Whew. Okay.
Incomprehensibly huge. So it's not as big as a blue whale, but 30 tons is still massive.
That is massive. What is that comparable to? Like how heavy is a shark?
Not 30 tons.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, right?
A shark might be, if you had a crazy massive monster shark, it might like 2 tons or 3 tons maybe.
Okay, so there we go.
So this is like,
that's kind of my
actually,
question.
I think in the article they compare it to the steamboat, the Rita, that the original movie is going on. They're like, basically it's the Rita.
That's so big.
Yeah, not sure. It's not the same story at all. I really don't know why. I mean, that dude was getting high on something and wrote a story that wasn't a story.
Well, I didn't mean to get hung up on that, but I did.
Shouldn't that be the tagline for our entire podcast?
Yeah, Mitch gets hung up on something else.
I'm on the most important part of the podcast. And then destroys his own reputation inside of 10 seconds.
One line at a time.
There's another book called In Time's Black Lagoon by Paul DiFilippo. And it ties into the lore a little better. He writes that Gilman is an alien that arrives during the Denovian period, 358 million years ago. He's part of this race that's telepathic, but his race views him as a degenerate and deformed, okay? Because he went too deep into the ocean and got a deep ocean bacterial infection from like ancient bacteria, and then becomes deformed, becomes insane, and becomes
green.
And he becomes green
from the bacteria.
So the race dwindles down to just him, and then into about the 1950s. And so then that's where it leads into the events of the first movie.
Okay.
Right?
Interesting take.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. I feel like if you're going to write a book about this, I think you could do a much better job than what we've already seen so far.
Yeah.
H.P. Lovecraft has a similar... You know who H.P. Lovecraft is?
I know the name. I'm blanking on things on his work.
We'll have to do a whole episode about him, maybe even a whole season on him. But he's kind of like a great-grandfather of horror. A lot of the stories he wrote inspire like modern like creatures and monsters and stuff like that. So he's got a story called The Deep Ones, which is like crab-like, human-like fish people.
Okay, you've talked about that. I think you've talked about this story with me.
With this?
Just in our personal conversations, yeah.
Oh, I'm not... Maybe I have.
It sounds familiar.
I thought I read this for the first time today.
Or maybe I just watched The Little Mermaid recently.
It's basically the same thing. H.P. Lovecraft.
Crab people.
All right, so we'll end on this because this is probably another really surprising fact about the whole... Maybe this might be the fact of the whole show. Are you ready? In addition to literary adaptations, in addition to reboots and cancellations, and there's a whole art section about pop culture references, because even though The Creature from the Black Lagoon hasn't made it back into a movie, he's been referenced tons, and it's been a pop culture icon.
Oh, for sure.
In addition to all that, and possibly topping all of it, The Creature from the Black Lagoon, the musical.
What?
Yeah, baby.
How?
So
how?
It was a show, and you'll never guess how recently it debuted either.
Oh my gosh.
2009.
Oh my gosh.
So Gilman stars in a live performance show which played for a whole year, I think actually maybe 10 months, just less than a year, at the Universal Studios in Los Angeles.
Oh, right? What?
Yeah. And they started in 2009, and then he was replaced by Joe Rogan in March of 2010.
Wait, what?
Almost Joe Rogan. He was replaced by like this live adaptation of Fear Factor that they would do at Universal Studios.
Universal Studios.
Yeah, but Joe wasn't affiliated. He wasn't part of it, but
dang,
he's part of it in spirit.
It's part of the history. So they would... Wow, and they made it into a musical.
Yeah.
So would they... They would do this in the... Because I don't know if you guys have been to Universal Studios lately, I don't know if they're still doing it, but I went a few years ago and they were doing live performances of Waterworld. They have this huge outdoor pool and area and set, which, look, I know we can talk for a while about the movie Waterworld and how it flopped.
And it's like literally one of my least favorite movies.
But this live performance of Waterworld at Universal Studios is awesome. So cool. So cool. So I'm just imagining them doing that in this setup, and I can see that being pretty cool.
I'll do you all
I don't know about the
favor.
musical part of it, but the performance part and the stage and set, that could be really cool.
I'll do everybody listening a favor. Don't say I never did anything for you. In the show notes, you'll find a link to a YouTube video of The Creature from the Black Lagoon, the musical at Universal Studios. If you're going to start it, you got to make an inward commitment to me that you're going to watch the whole thing. It's 30 minutes long.
It's the whole show.
If you start it, you got to finish it, but I'll link it, so feel free to check it out in the show notes. You'll also find some links in there for the Wikipedia pages that we talked about today. There were a few that I didn't get a chance to talk about, which we're already going. We're an hour 22, so I'm going to stop talking real soon. But some other cool articles that I ran across but didn't have time to speak on. There's an article titled List of Swamp Monsters.
Oh, cool.
Very interesting.
Yeah, my cousin's one of them.
Which one?
Watch out for Gert.
Which cousin? Looking at you, Caden. Swamp monsters. We got Shape of Water, which the article itself was. I didn't care for the movie. I don't know why I even mentioned that. You should go check out the article. But if you liked it, then go for it. Mermaids, Deep Ones, H.P. Lovecraft. And then there's a whole page on the Universal Monsters. So I'll say this: we won't have enough time to cover every single Universal monster, but they're all fantastic in their own way. And if you get a chance, go check out Universal Monsters. It'll hyperlink to all the separate Wikipedia pages, and spend an afternoon. Delight yourself with the history of cinematic horror.
What I love about these movies, too, and as you learn more about them, because there's plenty I haven't seen, but something I appreciate is when you learn about the different cinematic tricks that they use to create some of the scenes.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have the CGI, they didn't have the fancy cameras, so they had to get creative with how they carried out special effects.
Good old cinematic ingenuity.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that next week when I present.
Yep. So I guess I'll just leave you with this. I found The Creature from the Black Lagoon to be far more interesting than when I first started out. Hopefully you did as well. I should mention, too, the other page that I didn't talk about that you should look at is Yacuruna, which is the inspiration for Gilman. Very interesting stuff. And I'm a super big nerd when it comes to like local myths and legends about creepy
stuff. So cool.
But I'll leave you with this. I enjoyed reading about it. I enjoyed learning about it. I hope you did too. If you want to learn more about it, check out the Wikipedia article. But more importantly, you can rent the movie for like under $4. So why read about it when you can go and experience it?
Yeah, go watch it.
We're
gonna post up some of these photos, so check them out on our social. You can find us at Low Grade Research Pod on Instagram. Shoot us a DM if you have questions or suggestions for future episodes.
If you feel like we got something wrong, if you really don't like the way Mitch specifically sounds, or if you have a problem with the podcast at all, suggestions for future episodes, in addition to sending us a DM, you're always welcome to send us an email to hello@otherbrothers.studio. And if we like what you wrote, or if we think it's really good feedback, we might read it on air with your permission. So hit us up. And that's it, buddy.
Till next week.
Good to see you this week, pal.
We'll talk to you later.
See ya. Do you regret saying that?
Scrap it.